The massive alien fleet hung in Earth's orbit like dark clouds before a storm. Admiral Zexthara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green planet rotate slowly beneath them. His four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he reviewed the intelligence reports about this primitive world called Earth. "Commander Veltor, what do our scouts tell us about these humans?" Zexthara's voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered 17 worlds. Veltor approached with a datapad, his scaled hands moving across the surface. "They're a young species, Admiral. Their technology is crude. They still use chemical propulsion for space travel and fight with metal projectiles. Most interesting, though, are their strange beliefs." Beliefs. Zexthara turned his attention from the planet to his subordinate. "They have created elaborate stories about supernatural beings. Gods, they call them. Creatures of immense power that supposedly shaped their world and guided their civilization." Veltor's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "They believe in invisible forces that can change reality, beings that can move mountains and control the weather." The bridge crew erupted in chittering sounds of amusement. These humans seemed even more primitive than expected. The Korthax Empire had encountered many species, but none quite so delusional about the nature of reality. "Show me," Zexthara commanded. The main screen flickered to life, displaying images captured by their surveillance drones. Humans gathered in large stone buildings, bowing before statues and symbols. Others stood in circles, holding hands and speaking to empty air. Children sat listening to adults tell stories of great heroes who could accomplish impossible tasks. "They call them myths and legends," Veltor continued. "Stories of beings called Thor who commanded lightning, Hercules who possessed incredible strength, Amaterasu who controlled the sun, and countless others. They seem to believe these fictional characters once walked among them." "Fascinating," Zexthara mused. "Their minds have created elaborate fantasies to explain what they cannot understand. How utterly primitive. Do they actually believe these stories are real?" Our psychological analysis suggests a complex relationship with these myths. Some seem to know their stories, yet they still gather to discuss them, create art about them, and even base their moral codes on them. It appears to be a form of shared delusion that helps them cope with their limited understanding of the universe. The Admiral gestured toward the planet. "And these humans think their imaginary gods will protect them from us." "Some do, Admiral. Our intercepted communications show many are praying to these fictional beings for salvation. They seem to believe that divine intervention will save them for what they call the alien invasion." This brought another wave of chittering laughter from the crew. The Korthax had learned long ago that the universe operated according to physical laws, not the whims of imaginary beings. Their scientific understanding had elevated them far beyond such primitive thinking. "Very well," Zexthara declared. "Begin the standard invasion protocol. Deploy atmospheric processors to the major population centers. Once we've demonstrated our superiority, they'll abandon their delusions quickly enough. Reality has a way of crushing fantasy." "Admiral," interrupted Communications Officer Thexanel, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. They're requesting to speak with our leadership. Put it through. Let's see how these humans respond when faced with superior beings." The screen shifted to show a middle-aged human woman in what appeared to be formal attire. Behind her stood several other humans in similar clothing. The human began speaking in her primitive language, which their translation systems converted in real time. "To the representatives of the alien fleet, I am Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations. We welcome you to our solar system and hope to establish peaceful relations between our peoples." Zexthara was amused by the formal tone. This human actually believed she was in a position to negotiate. "Tell her that we are not here for peaceful relations. We are here to claim this world for the Korthax Empire. They have one of their planetary rotations to surrender unconditionally." The translator conveyed his message, and he watched the human's face change. "Fear, certainly, but also something else. Determination, perhaps? How curious. I understand your position, the human replied. But perhaps you don't understand ours. Humanity has faced many challenges throughout our history, and we've always found the strength to overcome them. Our stories and beliefs aren't just fantasies, as you might think. They represent the best of what we can become. Your stories. Zextera found himself genuinely amused. You think your primitive myths will help you against our technology? We have weapons that can shatter continents, and shields that can deflect your most powerful explosives. What can your imaginary gods do against that? The human woman's expression remained calm. You might be surprised, Admiral. Our myths exist because truth has a way of becoming legend, and legends have a way of becoming myth. Sometimes, the line between story and reality isn't as clear as it might seem. Enough of this nonsense. Zextera waved a dismissive hand. You have been warned. Prepare your people for occupation or face the consequences. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in relative quiet. Zextera felt a moment of unexpected uncertainty. There had been something in the human's voice, a confidence that seemed out of place given her species' obvious disadvantage. Admiral, Veltor approached again. Perhaps we should proceed with caution. Our xenobiological team noted some unusual energy readings from the planet's surface during their preliminary scans. What kind of energy readings? Unknown signature. The patterns don't match any known technology or natural phenomena we've encountered. They seem to spike near areas where humans gather for their religious or cultural activities. Zextera dismissed this with a gesture. Probably some primitive energy generation we haven't cataloged yet. These humans are clearly no threat to us. Continue with the invasion timeline. But, as he looked down at the planet, something nagged at the back of his mind. In all their conquests, the Korthax had encountered species with various belief systems, but none quite like this. Most primitive species worshipped their conquerors once they demonstrated superior power. These humans seemed different somehow. The first wave of atmosphere processors launched from the fleet, heading toward Earth's major cities. These devices would begin altering the atmosphere to better suit Korthax physiology while simultaneously demonstrating their technological dominance. It was a standard tactic that usually resulted in quick surrender. As the processors entered Earth's atmosphere, Zextera monitored their progress. Everything proceeded normally until they approached the first target, a massive human settlement called New York. Suddenly, the lead processor's signal became erratic. Report, he demanded. Sir, we're getting interference with the guidance systems. The processors are encountering some form of resistance. Weapons fire? Negative, Admiral. No detected weapon signatures. The interference appears to be electromagnetic in nature, but unlike anything in our databases. On the main screen, they watched as the first processor began to spin wildly, its descent becoming chaotic. The device, which should have been impervious to anything the humans could produce, appeared to be losing power. Sir, the sensor operator called out urgently. I'm detecting massive energy spikes across the planet's surface. They're originating from everywhere. Cities, rural areas, even remote locations with minimal human presence. Zextera felt the first stirring of genuine concern. Show me. The display switched to an energy map of Earth. Brilliant points of light appeared across every continent, concentrated near human population centers, but extending far beyond them. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their extensive databases. This is impossible, Veltor whispered. No primitive species should be capable of generating this level of coordinated energy output. As they watched, the energy readings continued to climb. The atmospheric processors, now completely out of control, began falling back toward space as if repelled by some invisible force. Several exploded harmlessly in the upper atmosphere, while others simply winked out of existence. Admiral, the communications officer called out with barely concealed panic. We're receiving another transmission from the planet. Put it through. The screen showed the same human woman, but now she stood outdoors in what appeared to be a large gathering place. Behind her, thousands of humans filled the area, many holding hands, all with their faces turned toward the sky. The energy readings from this location alone were off the charts. Admiral Zextera, she began, and he was surprised that she knew his name. I told you that our myths and stories represent truth in ways you might not understand. You see, humanity has always believed in the power of collective will, of shared purpose, of standing together against impossible odds. What is happening to our equipment? Zextera demanded. You're encountering something your science hasn't accounted for, she replied. The power of belief, when focused by millions of minds working in harmony. You dismissed our gods and heroes as fantasies, but you failed to understand something crucial about humanity. The energy readings spiked again, and Zextera felt the deck beneath him vibrate slightly. Something was affecting even their heavily shielded fleet. We don't just tell stories about gods and heroes, the human continued. We become them when necessity demands it. Every myth, every legend, every tale of impossible triumph exists because somewhere, somehow, humans have touched that power. And now, faced with extinction, we're remembering who we really are. The vibrations increased, and warning lights began flashing across the bridge. Zextera's confidence was rapidly evaporating as he watched his supposedly invincible fleet being pushed back by forces that shouldn't exist. This is some kind of advanced technology disguised as primitive beliefs, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The human woman smiled, and there was something ancient and powerful in that expression. Technology? No, I'll admit it. This is something far older and more fundamental. This is the force that drives a mother to lift a vehicle off her trapped child, that allows a soldier to hold a position against impossible odds, that lets a dying man crawl miles to save others. You've encountered the collective will of a species that has never learned to accept defeat. Behind her, the crowd began to move in unison, their voices joining in sounds that resonated strangely through the communication system. Zextera could see similar gatherings forming across the planet's surface, each one adding to the growing energy field that was now affecting his entire fleet. Impossible, he breathed, but deep down, a terrible certainty was beginning to form. The Korthax had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that because they understood the physical laws of the universe, nothing else could exist. But these humans were demonstrating forces that transcended mere physics. As alarms began blaring throughout the ship, Zextera realized that everything he thought he knew about conquest, about power, about reality itself, might be about to change forever. The flagship's main reactor began fluctuating wildly, and Zextera watched in growing horror as system after system reported anomalies. The energy field emanating from Earth was affecting their technology in ways that defied all understanding of how the universe should work. Admiral, Chief Engineer Mordex's voice crackled through the intercom. The quantum stabilizers are failing across all ships. The humans are somehow interfering with our power cores at the subatomic level. That's impossible. Zextera roared. They don't even have faster-than-light travel. Sir, Veltor approached with his scanner, his face pale beneath his scales. The readings suggest they're not using technology at all. These energy patterns, they're biological in origin, but amplified beyond anything we've ever seen. On the main screen, the human woman continued speaking, her voice somehow carrying clearly despite the electromagnetic chaos surrounding the fleet. You want to understand what you're facing, Admiral? Let me tell you a story our children learned from birth. The energy patterns shifted, and suddenly the space around Earth began to shimmer. Zextera blinked, certain his eyes were malfunctioning, as translucent figures began forming in the void between his fleet and the planet. Massive humanoid shapes, crackling with power, stood as if guarding the world below. Long ago, the human continued. A great warrior named Achilles was told he could live a long, peaceful life in obscurity or die young in glorious battle and be remembered forever. He chose glory, and in doing so, he became more than mortal. He became an idea, a symbol, a force that could inspire others to transcend their limitations. One of the translucent figures stepped forward, and Zexthara could somehow sense its attention focused on his flagship. The being carried a spear that seemed to be made of pure energy, and its presence caused alarms to blare throughout the ship. "You see," the woman's voice continued, "you've misunderstood the nature of our myths. They're not just stories we tell. They're templates for human potential. When we speak of Thor's hammer, we're not talking about a magical weapon. We're talking about the power of righteous fury focused into unstoppable force." Lightning began arcing between the ships of the Korthax fleet, but this wasn't natural lightning. It moved with purpose, seeking out weapon systems and disabling them with surgical precision. The electromagnetic pulses were somehow bypassing all their shielding. When we speak of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, the human continued, we're talking about the human drive to take knowledge that belongs to beings greater than ourselves and use it for the benefit of all. When we speak of Atlas holding up the world, we're talking about the willingness to bear impossible burdens for the sake of others. More figures materialized in space around the fleet. A massive form with a hammer raised high, electricity dancing around its form. A woman with a bow, her arrows made of pure starlight. A man straining to support something invisible but clearly immense. Each one radiated power that made the Korthax sensors scream warnings. "This is mass hallucination," Zexthara insisted, though his voice shook. "Some kind of psychic attack." "Sir," the tactical officer called out in panic, "our weapons are offline. The targeting systems won't lock onto the planet. It's as if something is actively preventing us from attacking. Then, we'll use manual targeting. Admiral, the weapons won't charge. Every time we try to power the main guns, the energy dissipates harmlessly into space." Veltor was studying his readings with growing amazement. "Sir, these energy patterns, they're not random. They're responding to the humans' emotional states, their collective will. It's as if the entire species is somehow channeling their belief in a tangible force." The human woman's voice continued to reach them, clear and strong. "You came here expecting to find a weak species clinging to primitive fantasies. Instead, you found a people who have learned to make fantasy into reality through sheer force of will. Every story of impossible heroism, every tale of ordinary people becoming extraordinary, every myth of mortals challenging gods, they're all true in the way that truth transcends mere fact." The translucent figures began moving closer to the fleet, and Zexthara could feel their power pressing against the ship's hull like a physical presence. The lights dimmed as the ship's systems struggled to maintain basic functions. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving distress calls from the rest of the fleet. Every ship is experiencing similar problems. The Admiral's Council is requesting immediate orders." Zexthara tried to think clearly, but everything he had learned about warfare and conquest seemed useless here. How do you fight an enemy that can turn their beliefs into weapons? How do you defeat a species that collectively refuses to acknowledge the limitations of reality? "Open a channel to all ships," he commanded. "Full retreat. Move us to the edge of the system while we assess the situation." "Sir," Veltor hesitated, "the Admiral's Council won't approve a retreat. We've never been defeated by a primitive species. Look around you." Zexthara gestured at the failing systems, the energy readings that made no sense, the impossible figures standing guard around Earth. "Does this look like a primitive species to you?" As the fleet began to withdraw, the human woman's voice followed them. "You're learning something important, Admiral. Humanity doesn't just tell stories about heroes. When the situation demands it, we become the heroes. Every parent protecting their child becomes Hercules. Every soldier standing their ground becomes Leonidas. Every scientist seeking truth becomes Prometheus." The figures in space didn't pursue the retreating fleet, but they remained visible, a clear warning that Earth was under protection beyond the Korthax's understanding. How is this possible? Zexteral whispered. Our science accounts for every known force in the universe. Perhaps, Veltor suggested quietly, our science isn't as complete as we thought. Hours later, safely at the edge of the solar system, the Korthax fleet hung in space like confused predators who had discovered their prey was actually an apex predator in disguise. The Admiral's Council convened via holographic conference, their collective confusion and anger filling the command center. Report, Admiral Zexera, demanded Supreme Admiral Kextor from the home fleet. Why have you withdrawn from an obviously primitive world? Zexera took a deep breath. The humans are not what they appear. They possess abilities that our science cannot explain or counter. Abilities? Kextor's four eyes narrowed. What kind of abilities? They appear to be able to manifest their collective will as tangible force. They turn their cultural myths into actual entities that can affect our technology and weapons. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Admiral Thexera of the Science Division spoke up. That's impossible. Consciousness cannot directly affect physical reality. I've sent all sensor data to the fleet, Zexterar replied. Examine it yourself. Our atmosphere processors were neutralized by forces that don't register on any known spectrum. Our weapons were disabled by energy patterns that seem to originate from human neural activity. And we observed manifestations that appeared to be physical representations of their mythological figures. Manifestation. Supreme Admiral Kextor's voice carried dangerous skepticism. Visual electromagnetic and gravitational signatures consistent with humanoid forms of immense size and power. They appeared to be composed of some form of exotic matter that interacted with our technology, but remained immune to our attacks. Admiral Velsix from the Strategic Division laughed dismissively. You're suggesting that a primitive species can create gods out of thin air? That their fairy tales came to life? Preposterous. Then, explain the data, Zextera challenged. Explain how they neutralized an entire invasion fleet without using any detectable technology. Explain how they generated energy levels that rival our reactor cores using only biological processes. The Council fell silent as they reviewed the sensor logs. Gradually, their expressions changed from skepticism to confusion to genuine concern. These readings, Admiral Taxara murmurat. If they're accurate, the humans somehow channeled their collective consciousness into a unified field effect. The energy output suggests millions of minds working in perfect harmony. But that's theoretically impossible, Admiral Velsix protested. No species has ever achieved true collective consciousness on a planetary scale. No species we've encountered, Supreme Admiral Kextor corrected grimly. Admiral Zextera, are you certain these humans pose a threat to the Empire? Zextera looked at the readings from Earth, where the energy signatures continued to pulse with steady strength. Sir, I believe we've encountered something entirely new. A species that has learned to transcend the normal limitations of biology through sheer force of collective will. If they can do this defensively, you think they could mount an offensive? Kextor's voice was sharp with alarm. I think we have no idea what they're truly capable of. Our entire understanding of what's possible may be fundamentally flawed. The implications hung heavy in the silence. The Korthax Empire was built on technological superiority and scientific understanding. If there were forces in the universe that operated outside those parameters, forces that could be wielded by primitive species through belief and will alone, then everything they thought they knew was wrong. Sir, the communications officer interrupted the conference. We're receiving another transmission from Earth. Put it through, Kextor commanded. The same human woman appeared on screen, but now she stood in what appeared to be a vast amphitheater filled with representatives from different human cultures. The energy readings from the location were staggering. Admiral Zextera, Supreme Admiral Kextor, she began, somehow knowing their identities despite never having met Kextor. I can see you're having a council of war. Let me save you some time with a simple truth. Humanity doesn't want to fight you, but we will if we must. How do you know our names? Kextua demanded. When millions of minds join in common purpose, we become capable of things that surprise even us, she replied. We can sense your intentions, your fears, your doubts. We don't want to use these abilities as weapons, but recent events have shown us that we can. What do you want? Zextara asked. What we've always wanted. To live in peace, to grow, to explore the universe, and maybe find our place among the stars. You came here to conquer us, but perhaps instead we can teach each other. Your technology, our unique perspective on reality. The council members exchanged glances. None of them had ever encountered a situation quite like this. And if we refuse? Textor asked. The woman's expression became sad, but determined. Then you'll learn that humanity has stories about more than just heroes and protectors. We have legends about terrible retribution, about ordinary people becoming instruments of justice when pushed too far. I pray we never have to show you those myths made manifest. As if to emphasize her point, the energy readings from Earth spiked dramatically, and for a moment, the space around the planet seemed to darken, as if something vast and terrible stirred just beneath the surface of reality. The transmission ended, leaving the Korthax leadership to contemplate the impossible. They had found a species that could make gods out of stories and turn belief into power. The question now was whether they would choose wisdom or destruction. 3 days passed in tense standoff. The Korthax fleet remained at the edge of Earth's solar system, while their leadership struggled with concepts that challenged everything they believed about reality. During this time, they detected something that changed the entire nature of their situation. Sir, the long-range communications officer reported to Zexthara, we're receiving priority messages from the outer territories. Multiple worlds are reporting unusual phenomena. What kind of phenomena? Energy signatures similar to what we observed at Earth, but smaller in scale. The colonial administration on Zirian Prime reports that their human slave populations have somehow disabled the containment fields and are demanding to speak with our representatives. Zextara felt a cold dread settling in his chest. The Korthax Empire controlled dozens of worlds, many of which contained human populations taken during previous, smaller-scale encounters with Earth exploration vessels. These populations had always been manageable, kept docile through superior technology and overwhelming force. How many worlds? He asked quietly. 17 confirmed, sir. Reports are still coming in. The implications were staggering. If humans across the galaxy were somehow connected, if they could share this strange power across interstellar distances, then the Empire faced a threat unlike anything in their history. Sir, Veltor approached with his scanner. I'm detecting quantum entanglement signatures focused on Earth. It appears the human populations across our territory are somehow linked to the humans on their homeworld. That's impossible. Quantum entanglement cannot be maintained across such distances, especially not between biological entities. According to our current understanding, yes. But these humans seem to operate outside our understanding. Sir, if they can coordinate their abilities across the entire galaxy. Zextara didn't need Veltor to finish the thought. An empire built on conquest and subjugation could not survive if its slave populations could suddenly manifest godlike powers at will. Give me a direct communication with Earth, he ordered, specifically with their leader, that woman. Minutes later, Secretary General Martinez appeared on screen. This time, she stood in what appeared to be a simple office, but the energy readings emanating from her location were still substantial. Admiral, she greeted him calmly. I was wondering when you'd call. Your people, Zextara began without preamble, on our worlds. They're exhibiting the same abilities as those on Earth. Are they? Martinez seemed genuinely curious. How interesting. We've suspected for some time that human consciousness might be connected in ways we don't fully understand. Quantum entanglement at the neural level, perhaps, or something even more fundamental. You're threatening the stability of our entire empire. We're not threatening anything, Admiral. We're simply being what we've always been. The difference is that you've forced us to remember our true potential. Zexthara studied her face, looking for any sign of deception or malice. He found none, which somehow made the situation more unsettling. This wasn't a species bent on conquest or revenge. They were simply refusing to be conquered. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "Nothing you aren't willing to give freely. But let me be clear about something, Admiral. The humans in your territory aren't our responsibility alone anymore. They're part of something larger now, something that transcends individual worlds or even individual lives." "Explain." Martinez leaned forward, her expression becoming more serious. "When you attacked Earth, you didn't just threaten one world. You threatened an idea. The idea that consciousness can transcend physical limitations, that will and belief can shape reality, that ordinary beings can become extraordinary when the need arises. That idea exists wherever humans exist, and now it's awakening. You're saying that every human in the galaxy is connected to this power? I'm saying that every human in the galaxy carries the same potential for transcendence. Whether they choose to use it depends on their circumstances. Your treatment of our people in your territory has provided those circumstances." A new voice interrupted their conversation. Supreme Admiral Kextor appeared on a secondary screen, his expression grim. "Admiral Zexthara, we have a situation. The human populations on our worlds have issued an ultimatum. They're demanding equal status as citizens of the Empire and the immediate cessation of forced labor programs. And if we refuse?" Zexthara asked, though he already suspected the answer. "They've demonstrated abilities similar to those we observed at Earth. Weapon systems failing, power grids fluctuating, and, in one case, an entire garrison found themselves unable to approach the human residential areas. It's as if an invisible barrier surrounds them." Martinez watched this exchange with interest. "Your people are learning something that humans have known for centuries, Admiral. True power isn't about superior weapons or technology. It's about refusing to accept limitations that others try to impose on you." "This is impossible," Kextor protested. "A few thousand humans scattered across our territory cannot threaten the Empire. A few thousand humans who believe they can transcend any limitation you try to place on them," Martinez corrected. "A few thousand humans who have remembered that every human myth about ordinary people becoming heroes is actually a memory of what we're capable of when we refuse to give up." "Sir," the communications officer called out urgently. "Priority message from the Science Division. Admiral Thexera reports that human populations on research worlds have somehow accessed classified databases and are demanding representation in the Imperial Senate." The silence that followed was profound. The idea of giving representation to slave populations was so foreign to Korthak's culture that it took several moments for the implications to sink in. "They're not just demanding freedom," Veltor observed quietly. "They're demanding equality, which is what we've always demanded," Martinez said calmly. "Not superiority, not conquest, not revenge for past injustices. Simply the right to exist as equals in whatever society we find ourselves in." Zexthara looked at the readings from Earth, still pulsing with that impossible energy that turned belief into power. "And if we grant this equality, what guarantee do we have that your people won't use these abilities to overthrow our government? What guarantee did you have that we wouldn't resist conquest?" Martinez replied, "What guarantee does any society have that its people won't rebel against injustice? The only guarantee that matters is the one you create through your own actions. You're asking us to completely restructure our society based on the word of a species we barely understand. No, I'll admit it. I'm asking you to restructure your society based on the reality you've already witnessed. Your empire is built on the premise that superior technology makes right. But we've shown you that technology isn't the only form of power that exists. You can adapt to this new reality, or you can be overwhelmed by it." Kextor leaned forward on his screen. "Are you threatening us?" "I'm offering you a choice," Martinez said firmly. "The same choice we offered when you first arrived at Earth. You can choose to see us as enemies to be destroyed or as partners to learn from. But understand this. The age of easy conquest is over. Humanity has awakened to its potential, and that awakening cannot be undone. As if summoned by her words, reports began flooding in from across the empire. Human populations were demonstrating abilities that defied scientific explanation. Not just the manifestation of protective barriers or the disruption of technology, but more complex phenomena. Humans on agricultural worlds were somehow improving crop yields beyond theoretical maximums. Humans on mining worlds were locating ore deposits with impossible accuracy. Humans on research stations were solving problems that had stumped Korthak scientists for centuries. How are they doing this? Thexera's voice crackled through the comm system as she reported from her flagship. These humans are exhibiting capabilities that seem to bend the laws of physics. The same way they've always done it, Martinez answered, somehow hearing the transmission. Through the fundamental force that your science has never learned to measure, the power of conscious will applied with absolute determination. You call our myths fantasies, but they're actually instruction manuals for transcending limitations. Zextros studied the data streaming in from across the empire. The pattern was clear. Wherever humans have been placed under extreme pressure or injustice, they were manifesting abilities that should have been impossible. It was as if adversity itself triggered some latent potential in their species. This power, he asked, can other species learn it? We don't know, Martinez admitted. Human consciousness seems to be uniquely suited to this type of reality manipulation. Perhaps it's because we've always lived with the contradiction between what we are and what we believe we can become. Perhaps it's because we've never quite accepted that impossible things are actually impossible. And you're willing to teach us? Even after we attempted to conquer you. That's what teachers do, Admiral. They share knowledge with students, even difficult students who start by making threats. Martinez's smile carried a hint of sadness. Humanity has always believed in redemption, in the possibility that even the worst situations can be transformed into something better. Textor's voice cut through the conversation. The Imperial Council is demanding a decision. We cannot maintain our current position indefinitely. Zextera looked around his bridge, noting how his crew was hanging on every word of this conversation. In the space of a few days, everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe had been challenged. They were no longer the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. What are you proposing exactly? He asked Martinez. A new model for interstellar relations. Instead of conquest and subjugation, cooperation, and mutual advancement. Instead of forcing weaker species to serve stronger ones. Finding ways for different species to contribute their unique strengths to common goals. And the humans already under our control will become citizens with full rights and representation, free to contribute their abilities to the betterment of all species in your empire. In return, humanity will share what we've learned about consciousness and reality manipulation. You would trust us with such power? We would trust you to learn from our example. Power that comes from the determination to protect and nurture rather than dominate and control. Power that grows stronger when shared rather than hoarded. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Korthak's empire faced a choice between evolution and extinction. They could adapt to a universe where consciousness could override physics, where myth could become reality, where the supposedly weak could become unimaginably strong. Where they could cling to their old understanding and face rebellion from every human population they controlled. Sir, Veltor whispered, the energy readings from Earth are changing again. On the main screen, they could see the same translucent figures that had appeared during the initial confrontation. But now they look different, less like warriors preparing for battle, and more like teachers waiting patiently for their students to understand the lesson. The choice is yours, Admiral, Martinez said softly. But understand that humanity has already made ours. We've chosen to become something greater than we were, and that transformation cannot be reversed. The question now is whether you'll join us in that growth or remain trapped in the limitations of what you think is possible. Zexthara took a deep breath and made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. Supreme Admiral Kextor, I recommend immediate implementation of the human equality protocols across all Imperial worlds. And I suggest we prepare for the most challenging learning experience in our species' history. As the Korthax fleet began its journey back to Imperial space, carrying news that would transform an empire, the figures around Earth slowly faded. But their message remained clear. In a universe where consciousness could transcend physical law, the greatest power belonged to those who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. Humanity had not conquered the Korthax Empire. They had done something far more profound. They had shown an entire galactic civilization that there were forces greater than technology, strengths beyond weapons, and possibilities beyond the merely physical. The age of conquest was ending, and the age of transcendence had begun.